Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. This is the second in a series of videos about the challenges that came out with the Metamorph Challenge League. So the first one covered how to get your first 12 challenges, and was more aimed at beginner players. This one is more aimed at intermediate players, and is discussing how to go about chasing 24 challenges. And then the third video will discuss some of the challenges you'll need to get your head around if you're going to go for either 36 or 40. Now, the first video in the series covered the 11 easiest challenges in quite a bit of detail. I'm going to skip these completely. Those are use currency, complete Metamorph Encounters 1, complete these quests, defeat these act bosses, complete these encounters 1, complete Metamorph Encounters 2, complete vendor recipes, even though I haven't done it, it is very easy. Defeat these act bosses 2, build a map device, modify maps, and craft modifiers. All of these I feel are the easiest 11. And if you want more detail on them, then go to the first video in the series. There's going to be enough challenges in this guide to get 26. And that's assuming that you do 2 of the 4 that I pick out as the hardest challenges in the first 28 challenges. So there's those 11 easy ones, and then there's a further 13 that I feel are moderate, and then there are 4 that are quite reasonable, but you don't necessarily need to go for in order to get your 24. So let's go through these. Firstly, complete these encounters 2. This I discussed in the first video as well, because I thought it was something that someone going for 12 challenges may or may not get. If they got it, it was going to be their 12th. Now, the key here, the hardest part of these is to open a unique Strongbox, and there's a few ways you can do that. Firstly, something I missed in the first video is you can complete the Plaguemore Prophecy Chain Part 4. This will force this prophecy will force a unique Strongbox onto a map. It's probably the easiest one to get, and so I missed out on it because I'd forgotten it existed. Otherwise, Ober's Cursed Trove is the easiest unique map that always has a unique Strongbox, and sometimes Zana missions will offer you a choice where you can go to chase down a unique Strongbox. Upgrading an item to a faded item is something that might be a bit of a pain in the ass in solo self-found, very easy in a trade-enabled league. All you need to do there is pick up Chimeria's Maul and the associated prophecy, both of which should be very, very cheap, and run a Waterways map, and boom, there you go. You've got your Chimeria's Avarice, which is still not a very popular item, but because both components of it are so cheap, it's very easily done. In solo self-found though, you're going to need to hold on to any unique items that drop for you that are upgradable, and eventually you'll be able to get yourself a pair where you've got both the prophecy and the base unique item. Some of the unique items that can be upgraded this way are quite rare, some of the prophecies are rare, but many of them are common too. So, skipping past this one, because I think a Legion and Betrayal Safe House. Legion Encounter is just a case of you'll find one in every 10 maps, and a Betrayal Safe House generally requires you to do about 10 Jun missions. It should be very easy to figure out. Turning Divination Cards is one I discussed in the first video as well. The ones that will be a sticking point will be to get a Corrupted Gem and a Prophecy, and I suggest here that you go for the prophecy, that you go for either Jeweler's Boon from Crystal Ore and Crystal Veins, or Vile Power from the Core and Toxic Sewer. As a bonus side effect, if you go the Vile Power route, particularly if you're in solo self-found, and you've found a Doomflesh, and Doomflesh is a pretty common unique item, then you'll have everything you need to create a Doomflesh's Prism unique bow, and that will cover you for complete these encounters to upgrade an item to a faded version. So, the Corrupted Gem one can be a bit more of a pain. There's a few choices. None of them are particularly easily farmed, although all of them are very easily acquired in a trade league. And there's not really a single clear best choice here. So I'll let you experiment with a few of them. Volatile Power is one, drops mostly in Vile side zones, and there's a couple of others as well. Okay, so we have complete these encounters 3. This was also discussed briefly in the last video, but for Erythophagia in Phantasmagoria map, you will need to kill her while you have a Flask of Warding active. I don't believe it's possible to step outside of all 3 curse areas at the same time in her arena, so you will need to pop a Warding Flask, and it needs to be a Warding Flask with a duration. If you use a mana flask, you can't have the sextant that makes mana flasks instant. Otherwise, at least if you're using a mana flask of warding, because that will cause it to be instant if that sextant mod is active. Otherwise, though, if you have a flask with a duration, can be a diamond flask, can be a quicksilver flask, whatever you prefer to have your warding on, then that's how you'll do that. There's also a few items that will make you outright immune to curses. Unaffected by curses doesn't work, immune to curses does. In Path of Exile, unaffected by curses basically means that all curses on you have 100% less effect, but they're still there. And immune to curses means that you can't have curses on you, any curse on you falls off straight away. To defeat Sebit Crescent's Point in Moon Temple map, which is one I haven't done yet, you just basically need to stand in the bad shit on the ground while you're killing him. This is easier on a lower tier Moon Temple than on a higher tier, and it's easier on a map with few or no map mods. Defeat Liege Scarhall in Ancient City map. This is basically all about getting the main boss, pulling him away from the rest of the monsters in the encounter. This doesn't require single target. In fact, I did it on a character that had automatic chain, and I did it just by pulling him away. In fact, when I did it, it was because I was running for my life, because I was running Ancient City early in the league when my character was extraordinarily weak, and I was actually quite scared of this boss, so I'm running around like mad, and end up pulling him away because he just moves faster than the Blackguard Interrogators and the Blackguard Enforcers. Defeat the arena map bosses within 5 seconds of the first one dying. Easiest way to do this is just to do it on a low tier map. So that'll be your easiest bet there. Okay, so obtain itemized samples. This one's really easy in yellow maps and is something that you'll probably have by the time you've run 20 yellow maps, assuming that you're actually engaging with Tane Octavius's encounters. Eyes are rarer at the time that I'm recording this video, and livers are the second rarest. There's a few workarounds here. The easiest one is to open up maps that have multiple bosses. So for instance, City Square, Precinct are good examples here. And when you're in them, kill all the bosses, and if there's multiple bosses in there, you'll have multiple chances to get an eye or a liver if that's what you need. If you've got an eye amongst one of the bosses, then pick that eye and then make sure that you don't put any other boss components into the Metamorph. Given that you're in yellow maps, you'll almost certainly have enough juice to push the counter over 100%. As you'll see on the right-hand side of the Metamorph screen, there'll be a sort of bar that moves up. That needs to hit the top, which is 400% 400% more life on the Metamorph, in order for you to be able to get the actual itemized sample. In order to do that, you'll need to use higher rarity components and also be in higher tier maps. But usually, once you're in yellow tier maps, especially if you're in red tier, you'll find that that'll come almost automatically. Prioritize the eye ruthlessly. Once you've got the eyes, prioritize the livers. The lungs, the hearts, and the brains are less rare, and so you'll have no trouble getting those. Next up, we have complete these encounters 4. Now, I want to warn you that this is a little bit solo self-found unfriendly, but you're still probably going to need to do it for 24 challenges. This essentially is all about playing a bunch of older content quite a bit. So you'll need to delve to depth 100 in your Azurite mine. This will require you to do probably about 20 Nico missions, and then delve into the delve mines. And those 20 missions should be in high yellow or low red maps. That'll give you enough self-fight to get to 100. In fact, it may give you quite a bit more than you need. Defeating a bestiary boss. This one's an element of luck. You'll need to run your Einhar missions, and he will give you a bunch of different rewards. Well, he'll spawn various red beasts in the map. A small minority of those red beasts will, when sacrificed at the beast crafting altar, will have an option to open a portal to such and such a monster's lair. These are the bestiary bosses. Craesian and Sakoaral are easy. The two that start with F are harder, so Venomous and Feral. Feral is the rarest of the lot. Venomous is also quite rare. Craesian is uncommon, and Sakoaral is fairly common. So you'll find that you'll be able to get that maybe with 30 or 40 Einhar missions on average. But as with everything else that is all about randomness, the more times that you do it, the more chance you've got of getting it, and it is possible to just get a really unlucky streak. but Sakawaro does come up a fair bit. Defeating an Abyssal Lich. These involve completing abysses in maps. It must be in maps, it doesn't count if it's in the storyline. And then approximately 1 in 5, maybe 1 in 8 abysses will end up with a portal to a new area, an Abyssal Depths, and approximately maybe 1 in 5, 1 in 8 of them will have an Abyssal Lich at the end of it. I haven't yet had an Abyssal Lich this league, which is unusual for me. Normally, I find that by the time I'm in the low 90s, I've had maybe 5 or 6 of them. But obviously randomness is randomness. Sometimes you just get a lucky or unlucky streak on a particular thing. However, if you're in a trade league, it should be pretty easy to ask around in the Trade 820 channel. Trade 820 is a channel where players, and this is just the in-game trade channel, so you just, in the game client, you just press enter to bring up chat, then type /trade space 820 enter. This is somewhere that players can trade intangible things in-game. Now, there's a moderate amount of scamming, but not usually on small value things like Abyssal Liches. It would be pretty reasonable for someone, if they have an Abyssal Depths, they've checked it and ascertained that it has a Lich at the end of it, it's pretty reasonable to say, hey, I've got 4 portals to fight this Abyssal Lich, and it's going to cost you 10 Chaos Orbs to come in. So there'll be plenty of potential to then go and sell these Abyssal Lich kills to other players if you're lucky enough to get one. Or if you're unlucky enough and you just don't seem to get one, then you can buy them from other players that way. Next up is Defeat a Breach Lord. This just requires getting a full Breach Stone, so a full stack of 100 Breach Splinters, or maybe you'll just get lucky and have a Breach Stone drop outright. And then you need to defeat the boss encounter at the end of it. These bosses are not trivial if you're not used to them. There are guides around on the internet. I don't have any of them, but other players do. Particularly if you're going to go up against Chayula. Chayula is very difficult, and her Breach Stones are by far the most expensive as well. I would suggest that if you're not familiar with this content, that you use a Zophs, an Esches, or a Tulls. They are the easiest, and they're pretty reasonable. If you've got a character that can smoothly clear low-tier red maps, then you should have no trouble defeating a non-upgraded Zophs, Esches, or Tulls Breach Stone. So next up we have complete twinned maps. This is something that you should probably get through natural play, as long as you do at least tier 1 through 11 maps. You'll see that I've missed tier 2, just by dumb luck I didn't end up getting any tier 2 maps that twinned, but that doesn't matter because you only need to do 10 of the tiers. This will come up through natural play just by mapping a lot and using an alchemy orb on all of your maps, at least once you're able to do so. Don't worry so much if you roll a map and it turns out that it's twinned but it's too difficult for you to do. So maybe it's got twinned and 3 damage mods and you can't handle it. Maybe it's twinned and elemental reflect and your build's allergic to elemental reflect. If that comes up, twinned is not such a rare mod that you need to worry about that. It'll come up again. Now, complete Metamorph Encounters 3. This is one that requires a fair bit of grinding, but that you will hit. In my experience, I hit this through natural gameplay, doing most of the Metamorph Encounters that I came across when I was level 91 or 92. I can't remember which. The unique ones require that you complete about 200 Metamorphs in maps. The rare ones will probably come a bit later than that, and the normal ones might be a bit of a pain as well, because even though 100's not many, you generally don't get all that many normal monsters in your Metamorphs later on. However, nothing in this is difficult. It's just a case of running more and more maps, and like I said, 200 will get you over the unique line. Rare will probably be outstanding, and then you can just target farm the ones you're missing. So, if you've got normal, rare, and unique done, but you're missing magic, then you can just ruthlessly prioritize taking magic monsters over everything on Metamorph selection, except perhaps for the very, very most lucrative of rewards. So, that's Metamorph Encounters 3. Next up we have Unidentified Maps, and this is another one that I think is pretty much a must-do for going for 24 challenges. Everything so far is a must-do. And this one involves doing rare maps in 10 of the 16 different tiers that are unidentified. Now, some builds can just do maps unidentified. I know the build that I'm playing at the moment, I can just stick a rare map in, and I'm confident that there's no mods that will ruin me completely. There are mods I don't like doing. I don't like facing a map with temporal chains. I don't like facing a map with zero regen, because then I'm entirely reliant on the mana flask. These are annoying, but they're not impossible. However, a lot of builds, of course, it's not an option to just stick an unidentified map into the map device, because if you're a physical damage build and you're not immune to physical reflect, then you will die the first time you hit a pack of enemies. So in that case, you can craft your own unidentified maps. Roll up a map that you can beat, and then Varl it. When you use a Varl on a map, there is a 1 in 4 chance that it will remember the mods that are on it, but go unidentified. You can then safely run that, knowing that it's the mods that it had before it was Varled, and that you can easily beat it. So that's a method that I think is pretty easy to get this one done. If you do it that way, it's going to cost you 40 Varl orbs on average, with a bit of variance on that, and otherwise it's just maps that you pretty much would have been running anyway. So that should be a pretty easy challenge to get. Next up we have Achieve Ascension. This is all about doing the Eternal Labyrinth. In order to even get into the Eternal Labyrinth, you need to have done the 3 earlier ones, and I think that pretty much everyone that gets to yellow tier maps has done the Merciless Labyrinth by that point. But the Eternal Labyrinth requires you to do a lot of maps in order to find the 6 trials. I know that it took me ages and ages and ages to find the last trial that I needed, which was the Trial of Crippling Grief in this league. And eventually I found it myself before I ended up going and breaking down and buying it from another player. But if you just can't find it and you're in a trade league, again, this is a spot for Trade 820. Sometimes you'll find a player has got Trial of Stinging Doubt, perhaps maybe that's the last one you need, and they just say, Trial of Stinging Doubt unsolved 2C. And what they mean by that is that there is a Trial of Stinging Doubt in their map, it's unsolved, they don't intend to do it, and they're happy to sell you a portal into their map for 2 chaos. So in that case, you can go and do that. One really important thing I will add, when buying trials from other players, it can be nasty if you're on very different servers to each other. For instance, I'm in Australia and I can play with minimal latency on the Australian server and the Singapore server. If I play on any server in Europe, I will have considerable latency. If I play on any server in Russia, I will have awful latency, beyond, to the point that it's pretty much unplayable. If I join a group, so someone else has got, say, Trial of Stinging Doubt, and let's say I needed that, and I joined their group, and they created the map on the Moscow server, I'm going to have a really hard time beating that trial. And that's even in softcore, I'd be a bit hesitant about that. If it was... the reasoning there is that the traps in the trials, their damage is based upon your character's life. It is not based upon your character's... it is not based upon the monster's level zone. So you can be in a monster level 73 trial and still be taking massive hits from these traps. Many of them can kill you with 2 hits if you're not quickly regenerating life in between being hit. So always take those trials seriously, and if you're on hardcore, have a plan before trying one on a server that you've got high latency on. That's just an important little warning to keep in mind. So, next up we have Use Catalysts. I mentioned this as an optional one for going for 12. This is a very small economic waste. You'll just need to use all 7 catalyst types. Chances are only one or 2 of them will be of use to your character, maybe 3, depending upon the items that you're wearing. So you're just going to need to waste the other 4. It's neither here nor there. At current market prices in Metamorph Softcore Trade Enabled, this is wasting about 35 chaos if you don't need any of them. And it's also currency that you've probably already looted, which feels less impactful to spend than currency items you have to trade for from other players and then go and waste. So that's the first ones that I suggest you absolutely definitely do. There's a couple of optional ones. I'm going to come back to Encounters 5 and Blight Encounters. We're going to save these ones. We'll be coming back to them shortly and discussing them. Next up we have a level 90, which is again in the core 24. This one's just a matter of running about 150 maps once you get to the end game, maybe a little bit more than 150 depending upon the tiers you're running. And I think it is something that would be considered in mandatory for reaching 24 in my opinion. Next up we have obtain rewards from Metamorphs. This is something you'll get through natural gameplay. You won't need to go out of your way, you won't need to deliberately pick bad reward types just in order to get them. Just keep reading and picking the best one each time, and within a reasonable period of time you'll get this. Identify influenced items is a little bit of a painful one in solo self-found. This is very easy in a trade league. Buy a Shaper Scarab from another player, buy an Elder Scarab from another player, and kill the four basic Conquerors of the Atlas once each. So you'll have this by the time you're at yellow maps. However, if you're not in a trade league, then you're going to need to go out of your way to force a Shaper and Elder item to spawn. You may not get a Shaper or Elder. You may not find Shaper or Elder Scarabs while you're running, and you may not get to the point of doing the Shaper's Guardians in a 24 challenge run. So those are the sort of main ways that they drop. The other ways that you can force them though are from Metamorphs. Metamorphs will sometimes have an option that will look like armor, and if you mouse over it, it'll say, hey, this item will drop a Shaper or Elder armor piece. Sometimes it'll have the same for weapons, and sometimes it'll have the same for jewelry. Should just go out of your way to pick those until you've completed this challenge, and then once you've done that, you're golden. So that's IDing influenced items. That's the last of my core 24, but I want to add in 4 more that I think are options that you can do that are a bit harder, but at least in my opinion they're a bit harder, but they're all very doable for a 24 or 40 player. And they also can fill in as a bit of if for some reason one of these challenges in the core 24 was too hard, then you can use these as fallbacks. So, complete these encounters 5. This is about using Zana's map device and the various options on it. Opening maps with Fortune Favors the Brave requires wasting 90 Chaos Orbs. You will get some value back from that, because every time you use Fortune Favors the Brave, it will add some sort of monsters or some sort of extra value to the map that you're running. So it's not a total waste. You'll just need to go out of your way to use it. Now, defeat Beyond unique bosses. This will require you to run maps that have Beyond inherently on them and that you add Beyond to from the map device. If you have one of these so-called double Beyonded maps, you will get an extraordinary amount of Beyond bosses in it. Perhaps 10, perhaps 12 in just one map. So that's the fast way of doing it. The alternative way is just to naturally map, and every now and again you'll get a map that's got Beyond on it. Run those, you'll get 1 or 2 bosses here and there, and by the time you've done maybe 2,000 maps, you'll find 50 Beyond bosses in them, and you'll get your 50 or 50 that way. But if you want to turbocharge this, definitely use Zana's Beyond on a map that already has a Beyond inherently on it, and you'll get this in no time. For Legion Monoliths, there are 2 ways you can do this. You can just run maps normally. I have got my 50 from running maps normally. Or you can use Zana's Legion option. To unlock the Legion on Zana's map device, I believe it requires you to have 125 Atlas bonus. It may not be exactly 125, but it's somewhere around that number. And at that point, Legion will be added as an option. You can add a Legion Monolith to a map for 6 Chaos Orbs, and that can help turbocharge your progress through this. As well as that, there are Scarabs, there are other mechanics that can add Legions to various other places. Activating Shrines. Shrines come a lot from Sextants. I did a video guide on Sextants recently, and there's quite a few mods that will add 1 shrine on a standard shrine, a simple sextant or a prime sextant, and we'll add 2 shrines if you roll them on an awakened sextant. So that's one way. As well as that, shrines do appear a fair bit in maps, but this will be the one that you'll get last, especially if you're going out of your way to get Fortune Favors the Brave, and the best way to turbocharge it is going to be to use sextants to do so. So that's complete these encounters 5. That's the first of the optional backup ones. Next up we have complete Blight encounters. And the reason that I didn't put this in the core section of the guide Fully upgrading a tower is trivial. Anointing a ring with a tower enchantment and an amulet with a notable passive, both of these are very, very easy to do. Completing a blighted map. Blighted maps are hard encounters. Now, if you struggle, if you're finding, like, blighted maps put a lot of demands on your character. You need good clear speed in order to deal with all the trash mobs before you get overwhelmed. You also need considerable single target damage. Now, you can complete this in the necessary things for this challenge in a tier 1 blighted map if you can source one. However, lower tier blighted maps are a bit rarer than higher tier ones. That's because most players are running higher tier maps, and higher tier maps can only drop red tier blighted maps. So, you can either buy a tier 1 to 5 blighted map from another player and run it. Keep in mind that you can and you probably should just scour the map and run it as a white map. You don't need to add difficulty mods on it with alchemy orbs. Blighted maps don't really scale their loot very much from the map's inherent quantity. So that's one option. Or alternately, you can, if you're in a trade league, you can find someone else that's willing to help you beat the blighted map. So I've left this as a maybe because I feel that blighted maps are the most difficult encounter on this list. They're more difficult than anything else that you need to do in order to reach 24 challenges. But this is a pretty easy challenge if you're confident with blighted maps and you're confident in your build. So I'll leave that one up to you as to whether or not you do it. Next up, we have Defeat Shaper and Elder Guardians. These are 8 fairly challenging bosses from the old Path of Exile endgame. These are not the actual endgame bosses, these are the Guardians leading to them. And you start with the Guardian of the Chimera, Hydra, Minotaur, and Phoenix. These are beefy tier 16 bosses that have considerably more hit points than a normal tier 16 boss, and that have a number of nasty one-shot mechanics. However, all of them are very beatable. I've done guides to them all, although the Minotaur one I pulled down because I wasn't happy with it. If you need guidance with the Minotaur, there'll be other one. You'll easily be able to find other guides to the Minotaur. I've got guides to the Chimera, the Hydra, and the Phoenix, and they're all reasonably doable, but only if your character is comfortably able to beat tier 16 maps. The difficult part, though, is going to be sourcing these maps, and the ways that you source these maps. The higher that your awakening level of your Atlas gets, the more chance you'll get to get these to drop as bonus loot when you kill a tier 14 or higher maps boss. So if you kill a tier 14 map boss and your Atlas's awakening level is 6 out of 8, then you will have a 3% chance to receive a bonus map that is a Shaper Guardian map. So that could be a Maze of the Minotaur, a Forge of the Phoenix, and so on. Those maps are quite valuable, and at the end of those maps you'll encounter one of these bosses. You'll also get a very valuable Shaper Guardian fragment when you kill this boss. The Constrictor, Enslaver, Eradicator, and Purifier are similar, but they come from the Elder's Guardians. The Elder's Guardians are probably a bit easier than the Shaper's Guardians, although this can vary based upon your experience with the fights. Just numerically, they're a little bit easier though. The Enslaver is mechanically tricky and can be quite messy, so perhaps consider the Enslaver to be as hard as the Shaper Guardians, whereas the Constrictor, Eradicator, and Purifier are a bit easier. They're a bit more numerically forgiving as well. So for instance, if you're playing a fairly undergeared Juggernaut character that has 6,500 health and has 7 endurance charges at endgame, the Minotaur can one-shot you with a couple of his attacks that are, dodge this or die type attacks. The Phoenix can one-shot you with another dodge this or die type attack. However, you will probably be able to tank everything that the Constrictor, the Purifier, and the Enslaver can do with that amount of hit points. The Eradicator does a lot of small hits and may still pose you a bit of a danger. Anyways, that is an optional extra. It would be, for a lot of people, their 25th challenge, but you can certainly do it before hitting 24. As you see, I'm at 23 at the time that I'm recording this video, and I've got this one out of the way. Next up is complete unique maps. This is another sort of optional stretch goal, and this one is pretty easy if you're in a trade league. If you're in a trade league, all you need to do is pick 4 of them that you're going to skip. Now, there is one legitimately extremely hard map here, and that is Hall of the Grandmasters. There are 4 expensive maps And these are Parandus Manor, Doriani's Machinarium. There are 5 expensive ones. Parandus Manor, Doriani's Machinarium, Hallowed Ground, the Vinkdar Square, and the Coward's Trial. So, you will need to pick 2 of those 6 most difficult ones to complete and skip them. I suggest that you'll need to pick 2 of them and do them, and then you can skip the other 4 in order to get credit for this challenge. So Parandus Manor is usually the most expensive map on the Atlas. At the time I'm recording this video, Doriani's Machinarium is about the same price as well, but usually Doriani's will become a bit cheaper over the league, whereas Parandus Manor will get more expensive. Hall of the Grandmasters is very difficult, so I suggest skipping those 3 and then just doing some of the rest. Basically all the rest. You can skip 1. If you're in solo self-found, however, this is going to be a lot harder. You're going to need to take advantage of every available source of random unique maps that you can. The Beastcrafting Altar provides pretty common options for getting a random unique map. That can help you out with this challenge. In addition to the Beastcraft Altar, you've got the Divination card, the Encroaching Darkness will help you out, and there's also the Otherworldly Incubators. Otherworldly Incubators drop from Metamorphs quite a lot. If you see one that says drops additional Legion Incubators, that's actually one of the best rewards. It probably is the best reward other than some of the really special ones like drop a Beachhead. So if you see drops additional Legion Incubators, always take it, and often you'll get Otherworldly Incubators. Stick them on a piece of gear that you're not going to take off anytime soon, and when that incubator matures, you'll receive a random unique map. Anyways, that is the 28th challenge I wanted to discuss. So that's somewhat of a little bit of a bonus one. You don't need to do it, but I think for a lot of people, it will feel pretty reasonable to do. The other challenges, so that's covered 28 of the 40. The other 12 challenges I think are quite a bit harder, and I'm going to leave the discussion of those for the 36 and 40 videos. Anyways, if you've got any comments or questions, definitely fire away. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there, and I hope you have a good one.